This Casey Cares segment is brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, www.kaufman.org. I'm Ruth Baum-Biggis. While some of us get caught up in the excitement of sports here in Kansas City, there is so much to be excited about in the heart of America with our arts community. And the Folly Theatre is right there as a shining star, one of the oldest and most established art venues. The Folly Theatre had its opening in 1900 and sat on 12th Street, hosting some of the biggest names of the century, among them the Marx Brothers, Gypsy Rose Lee, and Al Jolson. And over the years, it fell into disarray, but in 1974, some passionate civic leaders saved the Grand Lady on 12th Street, restoring the historic theater to new glory and continuing its reputation of bringing in some of the best musicians and artists in the world. Well, since January of 2022, Rick Truman has led the Folly as its executive director, and he's here to share with us the story of this amazing treasure that's enhancing lives through the power of the arts. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you, and it's so exciting. Again, fess up, Rick and I have known each other through another arts entity. We should share with our audience for a number of years. You were over at Quality Hill Playhouse. And
just
now you're at the
Indeed, I didn't have far to move when I moved my belongings from one office to another.
But how wonderful for you, and how lucky for the Folly Theatre. It must be a little bit different offerings for both arts groups. But just wondered, here you became an art leader at this great Grand Lady, kind of at the end of the pandemic or phase 2 of the pandemic or whatever the heck we're living in these days.
Yeah.
I just wondered, what was your transition like coming over kind of in this wonky period of nobody really knowing?
It was exciting. It was terrifying. It was everything all at once. I mean, in addition to that, we were getting ready to launch a $4 million renovation project. So that was its own animal. But I like the way you put phase 2 of COVID. We're not out of it by any means. It is something that we are going to be living with for a long time, really, the ramifications of it. But we were at the point where we were having to figure out how to adjust. And we're still at that point. We are still looking at the challenge of getting audiences back into venues. You know, for a long time, people said, oh, we miss the live arts. We miss being in the theaters. And then the theaters reopened and everyone said, I want to come back. I'm not sure if I'm ready yet. There is still some pull to getting people off of Netflix, getting people off of, just the comfort of, it's cold. I got home after work. I don't want to go back out. They got used to that. And so finding that way, particularly when you have 1,000 seats to fill in your venue, it's still a challenge.
So how have you guys navigated that?
It has been it's been a long, interesting process. We are trying to figure out how to work with smaller audiences, because when somebody comes into your venue, more often than not, the fee is the fee, and it doesn't matter whether you have 10 people in the crowd or whether you have 1,000 people in the crowd. And so trying to figure out how to adjust accordingly, in terms of costs, to still make it the thing is, you still want to bring in world-class artists. We are still a world-class venue that should be bringing in the best possible jazz artists, the best possible Americana artists, and for our partners, Friends of Chamber Music, bringing in world-class chamber musicians. And Harriman Jewel series, they're bringing in amazing, talented people from across the globe. And you don't want to reduce the quality of your art, but you do have to figure out some ways that you can, I don't want to say cut costs, but be creative in terms of how you're presenting it to be cost effective. And then certainly trying to figure out advertising. Honestly, that's another thing that even before the pandemic, advertising changed radically when print media started becoming less and less ubiquitous. I mean, it used to be you put an ad in the local Kansas City paper and that sold your tickets. Now you have to navigate social media and other online marketing opportunities and all the blogs that are out there and all the calendars that are out there. And it's a lot to try to figure out where's the biggest bang for your buck, particularly when you have limited resources, both time and staff. So we're still learning that. And you talk with marketers, particularly arts marketers, and we're all saying that. We're all saying there is no silver bullet, there is no magic formula, and we're trying to figure out what the best way is to move forward.
So you have the challenges of reaching audience and really trying to find out who that audience is. So has that audience changed since the P word descended on us? And if it is, how are you trying to address that?
It has some. I mean, people have always said that the arts need to find younger audiences. Every arts organization I've ever been associated with in my life everybody has always said, our audiences are aging, we need to find younger audiences. And now it's truer now than it ever has been, specifically because the younger market is the crowd that's invincible. They're not going to get in trouble with anything. They're not going to have any problems, so they're going to go out and do things. Whereas I am proud to say I am 53 years old. I am in my middle ages. I'm hopeful that's still considered middle ages. And even, people of my age are a little more sedentary, a little more like, yeah, well, we'll see. So finding a way to appeal to that demographic, and it's not so much changing the programming really as showing how your programming is relevant to those audiences. I mean, Olita Adams is coming in, and I mean, everybody know. I shouldn't say everybody, but Get Here was one of the pop tunes of the 90s that's still relevant these days. I mean, her music is timeless. There are audiences of all ages that would love her music, but making sure people understand that and realize that, yes, you may think that the Folly Theatre is a place where, my parents go, but no, you belong here as well. It's interesting to see. We've been having some, because we rent the theater as well as present our own programming. And we've had some YouTube artists, people who have gotten their fame off of YouTube, either music artists. We've had some just influencers who are kind of doing comedy type shows, whatever you want to call them. And it's been fascinating to see. They have had 800, 900 people in the house because of their reach through YouTube. And that crowd has been their 20s and early 30s. So figuring out how to tap that social media market, and particularly video elements in the social media market, is huge.
That's very inventive of you and of them. I find that really interesting that here these folks, and not so much the artists, but maybe just the influencers, have relied on that for their fame, yet they want to get out and touch their audience in a live kind of a format. And I want to segue to a comment you made about, folks got very comfortable with watching Netflix or whatever streaming service to see whatever they could see. What did the Folly Theatre do during that time? I know that predates you a little bit, but if you can share what they did, and are you trying to do anything with those successes and parlay that into audience building?
I am really glad you asked, because I think, so Gail Tallis was my predecessor, executive director, who retired in January of last year. And under her watch, the Folly started what we call the Live in the Lounge series as an opportunity to reach out to people during the pandemic with live entertainment. And not only that, the Folly has such a strong Kansas City history and such a strong commitment to Kansas City and Kansas City music in particular, that we also said, this is our way of giving back to the Kansas City musicians who can't make a living. All of the venues where people would go and listen to live music were either shut down or minimal opportunity. And so this was a way of giving musicians work at a time when they weren't getting work elsewhere. And I thought it was very clever. We called it Live from the Lounge when we started, and it was our Joan Kent Dillon Lounge, named after one of the philanthropists that you mentioned, who jumped in and saved the theater in '74 and then led the charge to do the renovations the next 7 years. It's named in her honor, and it seats between 40 and 50 people, depending on the format. And but we didn't have any live audiences to start with. We just had the artist recorded it live and presented it live on social, or I'm not sure exactly the electronic format, but presented it live, but then also archived it and sold tickets that way, so that there was some nominal funds coming in to support that program. We did get a grant from Neighborhood Tourist Development Fund in order to start that program, which was very, very helpful. But it was a great way of connecting audiences with live performances and giving live Kansas City musicians work during the pandemic. I thought it was very creative, very inventive, great way to keep the Folly relevant to people, keep musicians working. And we've continued that into live audiences opening back up. And now we have anywhere from a dozen people to 50 people at a show, depending on time of year, the appeal, the artist, what else is going on in the city. But it's a really cool program and a great opportunity to give back.
Have you kept any streaming aspect of performances? Are we now truly back at the Folly with live?
We're actually a bit in a middle ground. The person who had been doing our streaming, who was an expert at it, left to actually become a full-time YouTube influencer. I mean, that's how expert she was at this kind of work. And after she left, we just didn't have the staff resources to do it at the level of quality that we felt was important. Right. And so we stopped for a short time, but as part of our renovations this summer, we have installed equipment in that room that can live stream or do board meetings with live panoramic views of people in the room, bringing in people from outside as well. So we're adding that technology due to supply chain issues and all of the delays that everyone's been experiencing with that. That's not functional yet, but once it is, that capability will give us the opportunity to go back and start streaming those performances again. I think there's a great hybrid model for people who really do want to experience that performance, but they may not want to get out. And so finding a way to tap that niche is going to be key as we go forward.
Well, I would think people who don't want to get out or are not able to get out. I'm thinking of, for example, my mother-in-law who lives in an older adult facility. That audience that loved the arts, but because of physical, restrictions, could still possibly access. I guess the flip side becomes, does everybody just stay at home? So how are you trying to figure out that strategy, and who's involved in that? Is it you and your team at the Folly? Is it board? Do you have interest groups? Share with us how you're doing that.
So it's interesting that you bring this up, because in addition to the lounge, we are adding live stream cameras to the main hall itself. And so that actually was driven by one of our partners. Harriman Jewel Series came to us and said, we've had really good success during the pandemic with live streaming performances, because again, for them, it was the only way they could connect with audiences. And they said, we would like to be able to continue doing that once we are back into regular performances at the Folly. And so we'd like to talk about this. And those conversations all happened prior to my arrival. But then we reached out once I got here and we were working on the renovations in earnest. We reached out to Richard J. Stern Foundation and they gave us a grant to fund about half of the equipment that we needed. And we found other resources to finish that out. Again, those are things that are still not finished, but we are getting that equipment installed and hope to launch that by February or March. So that's been a bit of a partner discussion. We also reached out to Friends of Chamber Music, Heartland Men's Chorus, talked to them and said, we're looking at adding this functionality. Would you be interested? Is that something that would help you in what you're doing? And yes, obviously we've talked to the board as well. This quarter, between February and January and February, the board is going to be embarking on a strategic planning process to get us through the next couple of years. Now that we've finished our renovations, we said, okay, what's next? Just a little seed. Our 125th anniversary is in 2025. So we're looking at a strategic plan from 23 to 25, and then launching a new longer strategic plan that will go hand in hand with that 125th anniversary big celebration in the works for that. So put that on your calendar, September 23rd, 2025. But the board that's one of the things they have said in the strategic planning process is we want to talk about a priority of where does technology fit into what we're doing? How do we monetize streaming opportunities? How do we find that balance between live performance and streaming? I still think there is a huge demand for the live experience. There is something about experiencing the arts as a communal event. I still remember, and this is not arts, this is sports, but I still remember being at the wild card game in 2014, Kansas City Royals versus Oakland Athletics. It was the most energetic experience of any I've ever had, because at 11:30 at night, there were still 38,000 fans or whatever on their feet screaming. There is nothing, and that's not different in the arts. There is something about the communal experience of being with 1,000 of your closest friends in the moment, experiencing something you just can't get anywhere else. So I don't think streaming will ever replace live performance or diminish it to a point where it's problematic. But you're right, finding that balance is what we're in the midst of now.
We're talking with Rick Truman, and he is the executive director of the Folly Theatre. I agree. I'm an arts advocate, so of course I always would prefer that live. But I think it saved a lot of us that arts organizations, some very quickly found a way to at least bring the experience, into our homes, so we could muddle through that time that will be interesting to read about in the history books.
Yes. And, even before COVID happened, I had friends who said to me, have you ever thought about recording your performances and making them available online, or doing a live streaming wasn't a word kind of 5 years ago as much as it is now. But when there's an inch of ice, or 3 inches of snow, and people don't want to get out, they're like, is there an opportunity to still get that audience the performance they want just from the comfort of their own home? So that's been it, kind of underlying a lot of conversations for 5, maybe even 10 years. But now we've realized, oh, hey, we can do it. And not only can we do it, but this is a great opportunity for those audiences who you said who may not be able to get out to a live performance,
right,
even during the best of times. So I think it's a time that is long overdue to figure out.
And here to stay in a way that hopefully you can monetize some of it, because as we know, arts organizations always are fighting for dollars. Let's go back though. Let's talk about this $4 million renovation.
It became $4.3 million, and in a good way. When I started, we had just recently received a $2 million gift from the Sunderland Foundation. And I think we had maybe 2.8 committed at that point. And we knew that about 4 million was the project that if we did everything, we would be about 4 million. And Brian Williams, our development director, said, we really need to look at the project and see what we can whittle out, because I think 3.5 is very doable. But beyond that, everything is kind of a wish list. So we started looking at, okay, what is the project and what are the pieces that we would either wait and do later, or, okay, that's pipeline or a pipe dream, but that's never going to happen. And it ended up, the thing about fundraising is telling your story. And the Folly has a great story to tell. We have 122 years of history. And as you said, Al Jolson, Gypsy Rose Lee, the Marx Brothers. I mean, Humphrey Bogart was on our stage in 1922 in a play, Meet the Wife, before he became famous. The people that stage has seen and the audiences that have experienced incredible performances, people still come up to me and say, I still remember the best experience I ever had at the Folly Theatre was seeing Gregory Hines in 1980, whatever. It's a great story. And so we were able to get significant gifts from the Hall Family Foundation, from the Richard J. Stern Foundation, from Kemper. We were, and I'm leaving people out, it's terrible, but we have a great philanthropic community here in Kansas City. And we were able to tell our story in a way that connected to people. through the heart, and that's what you do. You have to tell people why you matter, and I think the Folly matters. And so our project got up to 4.3 million. Actually, part of it was escalation due to cost increases. We had planned to do this in 2020, and then obviously, everything fell apart. And it'd be a little melodramatic, but and but for the most part, we were able to say, hey, now let's add this back in, or hey, let's do this that we didn't think we could do before. And so we completely replaced all the hardwood floor on the orchestra level. All of the carpet is new. All of the seats are new. There's some technical infrastructure things that nobody would ever know, but routing of cabling for lighting and sound equipment that nobody would know. But if you actually look around, you see there aren't cables that run along the side of the hall anymore because they're all internal now. Stuff like that makes our lives so much easier. And when groups come in that rent the theater that want to do a different configuration of their lighting and sound equipment, now it makes that much easier, which reduces our labor cost. So the audience may not see it, but it's less expensive for us because we have this new infrastructure built into the building. So we like to say it's our Kansas City's only 19th century theater, but with 21st century amenities.
Oh, that's great. That's right. Well, the audience may not see it, but they're going to feel it when they sit down in those new seats, right?
Oh, absolutely. I can't tell you how many people have come out of a performance and said, oh my God, the seats are so much more comfortable. I had one gentleman who said, you don't need to replace the seats. I don't know why you're doing that. You don't need to replace your seats. And I defy him to come into the theater. I haven't seen him yet. I don't know if he's been there and I haven't seen him, but to come in and say, okay, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, they're wider, they're plusher. They just are so much more comfortable.
Well, it's not fun to go see something. And number one, if you can't see and you're obstructed by view, or what you're sitting on is not particularly comfortable, because then you get distracted from the great stuff that you guys put on the stage, which you do. You mentioned working with different groups. How important is that in the whole Folly operations? Having partner groups.
It's incredibly important. I mean, having a group like Hiram and Jewel Series, Friends of Chamber Music, Kansas City Friends of Alvin Ailey, Heartland Men's Chorus, because they are regular tenants of the building that, I mean, one, bring people into the building that somebody might not be a jazz lover or an Americana music lover, but they love men's choral music or they love chamber music. So it's great to get them in the building. And sometimes they get in and they go, oh, you do all these other things as well. Well, that's interesting. So it helps with audience development by bringing in diverse groups, but also we don't have to be on the hook to fill 200 nights a year with Folly presented events. We fill those nights with our partner events, and that alleviates us from having staff resources or funds devoted to bringing in other performances. So it's key in our business model to have events, but also to have partner events. There have been some people who have said, well, you really ought to do partner events and not program anything yourself. But that's not the Folly. The Folly is not only the events that happen in the building, but it's what we do. We have the longest running jazz series in Kansas City. We started that in 1981. It's been nonstop, with a brief hiccup during 2020 and 2021. But other than that, it's the longest running Kansas City jazz series.
That's amazing. Well, tell us about the main series that you have, so folks will be familiar, since you're fully open and renovated.
Yes, indeed. So we have three series. I've never mentioned our kids series. We have our jazz series. We bring in international jazz artists. I mentioned Alita Adams is coming in. There's a clarinetist, Anat Cohen. She was rescheduled. She was supposed to be here during the pandemic, got rescheduled into this season. So I'm super excited for her. I've never heard her live. Everybody talks about how fabulous she is. Tia Fuller, who played with Beyonce, she's on our series. I have a vocal artist coming in who was nominated in the fall, who's nominated for a Grammy for Best New Artist and nominated for Best Jazz Album, Grammy nomination for that. So bringing amazing international artists for our jazz series. We also have our Americana series, which is a bit, I don't want to say catch-all, but Americana is really the music of the people. It's the American experience. And so we have gospel artists on that. We have country artists. We just had an R&B artist back in December. We have a bluegrass artist coming in April. But again, this artist coming in April was just nominated for a Grammy Award, also for Best New Artist, but also for Best Bluegrass Album. And so I'm super excited about her being here. And then we have our kids series. Our kids series also dates back to the 80s, really before there was a Theater for Young America, before there was a Coterie Theater, before there were resident companies in town presenting children's theater. We were bringing in touring shows to the Folly. We still do. And we have a great program that underwrites funding for Title I schools, so they can experience live performances and not have to afford it because they don't have the budget to do so. But it's incredibly important to bring young people in to experience live theater so they develop an appreciation for it at a young age. And then when they do become in their 20s and 30s, they understand the value of it. They have that emotional experience of having been there.
Truly accessible arts, so that
Absolutely.
everybody can fall in love. It's a gorgeous theater. Where is the best place for people to find out what's going on at the Folly, what offerings you have, et cetera?
Follytheater.org is our website, and we have everything that's possibly happening at the Folly Theater on our site. So all of our partner events, they are there as well. All of our series, our jazz series, our kids series, everything is on that site. We are doing a refresh of the site. So it's fully functional now, but come back and see us in 6 months and you'll see a brand new splashier website. That's the best place.
Well, and you'll be all ready for the big birthday.
Yes, indeed. I can't tell you how excited I am. I'll get another little nugget about that. We were placed on the National Register of Historic Places June 5th of 1974. And so we'll do a kickoff on June 5th, 2024, celebrating the 50th anniversary of being placed on the National Historic Register. And then that'll give us a year and a few months to lead into the actual birthday on September 23rd, 2025. Big doings coming up.
All right. So are you going to direct that, Mr. Director? I'm giving the audience a little, Rick directs also and performs. So are you going to direct all of this fun?
Do some of it. It's funny you mentioned that. I love to tell people that I actually worked here at the Follies as both an actor and director when there was a group called Civic Opera Theater in town.
Yes,
and
I remember.
I performed in the Mikado, and it was overwhelming to walk out on that stage and have 1,000 people appreciate the work that you were doing. And then to actually stage direct shows for Civic Opera, to be out in the house directing what was happening on the stage. Part of me being here feels like I'm coming home again. It is one of the best venues in town I've ever had the privilege to work in. It is such a warm, intimate environment. I cannot say that enough. I love it.
Well, I'd say the Folly Theater is lucky to have Rick Truman driving the truck, driving forward the arts, and at this great place. I too have had the privilege of being on that stage, and it's a pretty special thing, but it's very special to be in the audience as well. So everybody go check out the follytheater.org. Thanks, Rick. It's been great to have you.
Thank you, Ruth. It's been a privilege.
Thank you for joining us for KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We're produced by Charitable Communications, and this segment was brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. If you'd like to be a guest on KC Cares or Underwriting Opportunities, please visit our website, kccaresonline.org, and spread the love. You'll find us on Facebook and Twitter at KC Cares Radio, and on Instagram at KC Cares Online. Don't forget, you can catch us Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. on ESPN 1510 AM and 94.5 FM. Thank you for joining us for KC Cares.